How would you describe the reality for Black single women living in Toronto? Whew. I'm gonna cry. For the Culture with Amanda Parris is back. What are your biggest basketball ambitions?
Why be a basketball player when you can own the team?
This season, I'm traveling around the world to meet those the mainstream want to leave in the margins.
There's some things that have gone wrong in how we support Black men and Black boys. I'll be damned if you're gonna tell me that my little boy is a criminal.
Forget the online wars. I'm taking you to the basketball courts, barbershops, and bashments where real life happens. How would you describe the reality of dating in London?
There is fecal matter upon the pavement. You have to watch your steps.
I'm heading to the African continent and across the diaspora to speak with activists.
When you scrape the ground every day and you know everything that's going on, in this neighborhood, ain't no mistakes.
Athletes.
Most of these kids are 19, 20 years old, and they're getting $500,000.
Yes.
And they think that's normal.
Artists.
I was never once referred to as David. It was large black man.
So dehumanizing.
Exactly.
I met a Ghanaian who said to me, he wished that his family was taken in the slave ships.
Wow. Wow, that's gonna stay with me. New questions. What do you think needs to change?
I wanted people to peel away the food system and looking at through the lens of race, the lens of land, to the lens of wealth. Why is healthy food so expensive and fast food cheap?
Real stakes. Can you tell me a little bit about your own journey with your mental health?
Well, it's sensitive for me, but I'll try.
This system is rotten. These are innocent men.
Always pushing the conversation forward.
Jamaicans do not have the right to their beaches. This is the sea, and the sea is the common use for mankind.
You said this to me, it's not a tourist space.
Our primary objective is to heal.
It's beautiful when I see Black men create because, like, magic is made.
So how did you get out?
One day, the gate opened, I ran for it.
I was digging this tunnel. I'm Amanda Parris, and this is For the Culture. Can you tell me about some of the most surprising things that began to emerge?
African women are way more freaky than people think.
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks, the YouTube channel / podcast where I, your host Carolyn Hines, film culture critic and journalist, speak to film creators around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be interviewing creator and host Amanda Parris for the second season of her show, For the Culture. I always feel like I need to say it dramatically. And so this I want to say with my accent, like, for the culture. And we are also joined today by Allison Duke, producer and director, and one of the co-founders of Oya Media Group, which is an amazing group of company which produces content, Black content for Black creatives in Canada. But we're finally meeting in person.
Right.
Finally. But thank you so much, ladies, for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, and congratulations on the second season, which I think for a Canadian show is rare. For a Canadian documentary show is rare.
Just rare in general for Black shows, it seems like, globally.
Yeah. So this is the second season. Usually I would ask this question last, but I think I'm going to ask it first because so much has happened since the first season. What was the biggest learning lesson that you both learned for the first season that helped you with producing the second season, especially considering the number of topics that you covered?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the first season was very much an experiment. Mm-hmm. You know, I had an idea in my head, but it's a very abstract, and you're trying to create the thing but not exactly sure what the thing is, you know? Whereas the second season, we knew exactly what the show is. Obviously it changes, like, in terms of topics and the people that we're talking to and the locations, but the essence of the show was very, very clear this time around. And when you are clear in that way, then you get to be bigger. Yeah. You know, you get to go bigger, you get to be more experimental visually, you get to, you know, see what worked really well. So one of the things that we really wanted to push this season was more scenes. So we'll do the interviews, but we also wanted scenes to immerse in the space, and we wanted to spend some time like really capturing the locations visually, so that hopefully we lean more into the travel show aspect, so viewers feel like they're on the journey with you a little bit more. And then I think just trying to continue to do the things that we did well. So one of the things I'm very proud of is this idea of pushing conversation forward and trying to ask questions that start where the conversation often is in the group chat or online, but then as the episode progresses, push it even further and see what connections you can make. And so that continued to be a goal from season 1. So there's things that we did that I feel like we did really well that I wanted to continue. The last thing I'd say is like the casting. So I think when I initially pitched the show, the idea was like, we're gonna get all these big names, and then actually what we realized was in trying to find regular people who are living these issues on the front lines was more interesting in a lot of cases. And so we just leaned into that this year, and I think we did a really great job casting again and finding just incredible folks that are not household names necessarily, but have really important things to say on all of these topics. So I think I don't have a singular thing. Sorry.
No, I love when my guests give me such detailed answers, and what you mentioned are things that I actually do plan to talk about. Like, for instance, having regular people be a part of it. Like, I really enjoyed the episode Beyond Happily Ever After, which is the first episode. Like, you do have regular Torontonians involved, just like regular people that we see on the street. Whereas in the first season, you did have people like Larry Wilmore joining, and forgive me for forgetting his name, but he's a gentleman who's a CEO, and he's like one of the most, and he's one of the hosts on the Dragon's Den, right? West Hall, right? So like, I appreciated that you guys went a bit more ground level and kind of more like, just like community center, right? And for you, Allison, what was one of your biggest learning lessons from season 1 to season 2?
Well, season 1, I was a fan. I wasn't involved in the show.
But
so
observing it,
I just loved the show. I was a big fan, and I was hoping to work on the season 2. So when it came around to Oya Media Group and myself and Gaddy being involved, I was just really thrilled. But really, in the research phase and pre-production and trying to write what the episodes were all about, it was very clear that this was Amanda's vision, and the world is we're using Amanda's vision to take us around the world and talk about diaspora issues, and it's from her POV. So the trick was getting into Amanda's head and trying to figure out how she thinks about the world, how she asks questions, what's her curiosities. And that was very interesting and exciting for me, because usually when I'm working with a host, I'm writing for the host, and it's my perspective that I'm putting out there. But having to do that with Amanda, and she's so bright and well-read and thinks about the world in such a different way that I've seen in terms of, a Black host on television, I was just really excited just to be a part of it. And for me, it was, as a director, it was always that challenge of just trying to figure out, what does Amanda really think about this? And that was really, that was a joy to work in that way.
And it comes through in this season, and I think it is important that you were a fan and an observer first, because you do get that perspective of saying, what do I want from the host? Because what I noticed, because I did rewatch some of the episodes from the first season just to like refresh my memory, and I will say like your voiceovers this time breathe much more personal. And they're much more, and like the things you say sound exactly like almost instinctively, like you didn't sound overly rehearsed or overly scripted in your voiceover commentary. And I appreciated that, especially when you, like for instance in the episode when you went in Black Tourism, when you went to Ghana, and you were speaking to the I guess he's like the tour guide at Cape. Like I have so much to say about it. We could do one podcast episode on that alone, but like I appreciated when you said like you weren't sure of the way he was performing it was the correct way to approach it, because you are coming from not only as a diasporan person but someone from the Caribbean, and like your perspective as a Black woman again is going to read completely different. So like I appreciated that your voiceover, you got those thoughts, because when you said it I felt the same way, because I was like, this seems a way bit too much theatrical for the environment that you're in. Like, where's the reverence? But then as you said, like he doesn't have that perspective of someone from outside of Africa, so he doesn't have the connection that we have to enslavement and slavery. But when you said that, I was like, and like you did it in other episodes too, like even in like the basketball episode as well, when you were saying like why should we keep pushing Black kids to only approach basketball as a way out? And again, that's something I think that some hosts wouldn't necessarily want to say because it might seem controversial, but I'm like, no, like your voiceovers and like your thoughts do seem personal and genuine, and it's again echoed a lot of what I was thinking, so it would definitely echo a lot of what other people would think as well and have been thinking.
She's asking the questions that we think about but we don't say out loud.
Or you do, like I say it on Twitter, but but people that are like hosting, like doing these kind of interviews won't necessarily say, because they want to be like not necessarily politically correct, but they want to seem more they don't want to seem antagonistic, and they might see those kind of questions as being antagonistic, but I don't, because I'm like, you're asking genuine questions that concern the Black community.
Yeah, and I think it's also the freedom of having a POV show, right? Like we say very from the beginning, like this is a point of view show. I'm not coming at this as like an objective journalist. I'm coming at this as just a curious person who's a part of the culture that I'm making this for. And so I think that gives me a certain kind of freedom, as opposed to if I was in a news show where, you know, there's this expectation of a certain kind of distance and objectivity. But with this, you know, as Allison said, like very unapologetically, like this is through my POV, for better or for worse. Like these are the questions that I'm interested in, the topics that I'm interested in. And I think that gave us a certain degree of freedom to be a little bit more provocative sometimes, to be a little bit more, to question in a certain kind of way, maybe if not in the moment, then at least in the voiceover upon reflection, which is also a gift. You know, I write those after the fact, after I've had a little time away from the shoot, to think about what that experience was like, and that's also a gift, to not do it live and to like be able to reflect on what just happened. You know,
I think sometimes what I was just going to say, when I remember 1 or 2 episodes, you actually said that you said, I'm going to write my voiceover in one way, but I just need a moment. I just have to think about it, because I'm thinking about it a different way now,
right?
As it was being put together. You know.
Yeah, and that time is important for me, because I used to host a lot of shows where I had to do everything direct to camera. And that has its own, you know, positives. And I remember Allison was like, "You want to do something to the camera?" I was like, "Nope." Would you like to try? Maybe. And I was like, "Nope." But
I remember those
and not to say that like it might never happen, but I think the gift of being able to get that time is that you really, and it's a, you know, it's a thing I have in general. We're so reactionary right now, like you know, reviewers are expected to get an album on Friday and have a review out Saturday morning. Like you get no time and space to sit with a thing, and so this is our gift to ourselves. And like doing documentary, we get time to do the edit, not like the night of, but to spend time and figure out what's the best way to put the puzzle together. And the same thing goes for like the reflections on it and the writing.
And I think that's important, especially considering the topics you're covering. Like the first episode, Happily Ever, you were talking about Black women in Toronto and across, because you went to Ghana, you spoke to women in the UK, and about being single. And like that is something that for so much of us weighs heavily on us, partly because we live in a misogynistic society, but also culturally, our culture is focused very much on relationships and marriage and children. So like, and you covered all of that, and I appreciated that. You also spoke to the 2 women, Kim and Jumoke, in the Triple Crutches. Triple Cripples.
Yes.
Right, and the reason I appreciate it, because like they're talking about being the Black disabled women and facing the dating, the horror that is the dating landscape. And me as a disabled woman appreciated that you guys took the time to include that perspective, because again, that is something that is not often thought of and often considered in discussions about dating and dating life and culture in Toronto. And so I wanted to ask you about like selecting the topics and formatting the way the topics flow, because I kind of see like, yes, this is the 2nd season, but I kind of see it as the way how you guys approached it is that if you compiled all of the episodes together from both this season and this one, they complement each other. That's the way I kind of saw it, because they kind of like there's the first episode in season 1 where we're talking about diasporic language and culture and on like Twitter, and like one of the guest was Olu, and she's a novelist, and she writes romance novels. And so you begin the 2nd season talking about romance again in Black, but speaking it directly to Black women, and then having Black men. So I wanted to ask you guys about figuring out the format of the episodes and the topics for the episodes, because they're all like super like interesting, and also like I said before, like when you talk like you look at that and about Black tourism, and you went to Jamaica, and then when I was thinking about how tourism industry in Jamaica now has been completely flipped upside down because of the hurricane, right? I thought it was kind of, I was like almost like, this is surreal when I saw the topic list, and I was just like,
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then there's even the basketball episode. When you look at what's happening in the WNBA now, that's in a mess, right? And I was thinking, these young women that you spoke to, like, their perspective at the time you spoke to them is going to be completely changed now because the WNBA and the NBA is changing rapidly and not necessarily for the best.
Yeah.
Right. So I wanted to ask you guys about that, on like choosing and then reflecting back on the topics you chose.
Yeah, it's so funny to hear like they're in conversation with each other, because in some cases it does feel like we're continuing a conversation. So for example, like I really feel like Black tourism, which is actually the first episode of the new season, is a continuation of diaspora wars. Like it feels like, you know, we started the conversation and we didn't get to go to Ghana, but we touched on the year of return in diaspora wars, and then this time we got to go and have a deep dive into what is the impact when we visit these places and when we are in these places. But in some cases, you're drawing connections that I didn't even think about. So I was like, thank you for doing that, you know. In terms of how he's chose the topics, like Allison was asking, what are we thinking about for season 3? I'm like, I already have a notes thing. I'm like, you know, it literally is like what hits my fancy and I want to dig more into. And so I could just stumble onto something online. The other day, I can't say it aloud because it might be a topic, but like I was just hanging out with my homegirls and we got into a deep conversation. I was like, this is a great topic. Throw it into the notes app, you know. But I will give credit to where credit's due. For this season, there was an opening for an episode that I was just like, I don't have another idea. And Beyond Happily Ever After was actually pitched by one of our researchers, Pasint Matar, who is a single Black woman, and was like, I would love to talk about this. And I was very hesitant because I was just like, I feel like this topic is talked about all the time. I don't know if we have anything new to add. I refuse to repeat the wheel in any of our topics. And
You're not single yourself?
I am not single,
Right.
so who am I to be bringing this up? So there was a lot of hesitancy, and it took us researching and really considering and thinking about it to figure out what is it that we can add to this and what is it that we can contribute. And I'm so glad that you brought up Kim and Jumoke, because one of my things was like, who has been missing from the conversations that we've been having, period, in the show, and what is our responsibility? And I was like, I would love to hear from folks who are very public and talking about living with disability, and like living with disability and looking for love, or like living with disability and living a glorious single life, whatever. But I would love to hear from them. And so in terms of like the topic choices, a lot of the topics of the season was like, I was like, these are the ones that I want to do because I am interested in them. And then others, we had debates and we had conversations about what they were going to be.
Yeah, we had lots of conversations. The pre-production and development of this show is incredible. You know, there's 3 writers, they have 2 episodes each, and researchers, and some of them are the same people. And it's just a long time spent in discussion, researching people, you know, chasing people to talk to, and trying to see if we can shape a conversation based on this topic. And I think that's one thing we were looking for all the development and all the shows was, you know, just making sure that the conversations were rich and not surface level, and not even what you would see online. So maybe some stuff online, but going deeper and finding the right people to fill those spaces was, you know, an interesting conversation as well. Having the women, and I can't remember their names because I didn't direct those episodes, but the women, the disabled women, yeah, they were just amazing, beautiful, smart,
and so smart,
hilarious, and you know, they took up space in that episode, and I was so happy to see that. And the conversation throughout that episode is just amazing and incredible. So I think people will really enjoy that. I really love that episode as well.
The other challenge is like we have a limited budget. So it's like we can only go to so many places. So can we find the characters we need in those places, right? And so I was like, the goal this season, we have to get to the continent. We have to. Like that was the number one like travel goal. It's like we need to get there. Where like for next season, I'm like, we have to get to South America. Like, you know what I mean? Like I have certain kind of goals that I really want to hit. And so just like trying to cast with that in mind of like, you might find someone fantastic, but if they're in a state that we cannot budget for, then it sucks. Like we have to cut them. Can we find somebody in the States that we already have a couple of people? So there's all these practical considerations as well too.
in trying to have a global conversation. Every show has to have a
Yes.
global conversation. It just can't be like North America and some other place. It has to be global.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because the episode Black Tourism, where you're in Ghana and you're talking about, again, diasporic travel and black travel and tourism to Ghana and to Jamaica. What I thought was interesting, because a lot of it kind of focused on the year of the return, 2019, and I remember when that happened. And the thing that occurred to me when that was happening, because it was a big thing on social media, is that I always wondered, like, where is the invitation for Black diasporans from the Caribbean, Latin America, and South America? Because that marketing focused heavily on African Americans. Because even in the clips that they showed, like the clips that the tourism industry showed, had people like that were celebrities. Some of the most well-known Black actors turned up, and it was a big thing for them, and it was like happy for them. But I was like, what about the Black South Africans and the Black Latin Americans and the Black Caribbean people? Because before before our enslaved ancestors went to U.S., they went through the Caribbean. You know, like and even before slavery started in the U.S., Black Africans were being enslaved in Portugal and in Spain and across Europe, and it was like the year of return did not invite us back. And so that occurred to me in this episode, and I was glad to see that there was someone who is Canadian, which means that she more than likely has Caribbean background, in Ghana working in their tourism industry. And I kind of called
She's Ghanaian.
She's Ghanaian, but she lived in
Are you talking about Ivy Prosper? Yeah, she did live in Canada, but she has no Caribbean.
Oh, okay. I thought she was Canadian, because she did mention because she mentioned being in Canada and then going to
Canada. But she has Ghanaian ancestry.
Okay, so then that even kind of like that kind of thing, because the thing that I wanted them to really mention, it was like, we're the Caribbean people, where's the invitation for Black Caribbean? So I want you guys to kind of talk about that particular, because in talking about the responsibility of Black tourists traveling, like you went to Jamaica, and like you talked about the lack of accessibility for Jamaicans to their own beaches, you know. And so I want you both to talk about that, because I think for a lot of people, they don't understand, even in the Caribbean, our beaches are not accessible to all of us. You know, the Jamaicans, they had to fight for access to just one beach, Winifred Beach. And like even now, just before Hurricane Melissa, they were still having town hall meetings talking about access to beaches, because Sandals Resort is locking off access. Well, I don't know, they're probably going to stop, because colonialism does not take a rest. But, and in Barbados, it was the same thing in Barbados. It was a huge thing in the 70s, and it had to be codified in our law that after like years of protest, that no Barbadian beach can be blocked from public access. So I want you guys to talk about that, because the issue of tourism in like Ghana and in the African continent is different to the issue of tourism in the Caribbean. You know, like I think like Black people kind of approach tourism in Africa different to tourism in the Caribbean. There's a sense of entitlement that even Black people, specifically coming from America, take with them to the Caribbean. You know, so I want you guys to kind of talk about that.
Well, I'll just speak to part of it. This idea of the year of return really being geared towards African Americans. I think it was in part because of the anniversary that they were specifically celebrating, which was specific to the United States. But also, we live in a world where the U.S. is like the culturally dominant force, so I can kind of understand why the focus would be there, this understanding of like, you know, a population with a disposable income, blah, blah, blah. The Black travel movement as a movement being really defined by African Americans as well too, but also some Black British folks as well, I think. But you know what, I think that's a really great extension of the conversation that we didn't get to in the episode, but it's again like fantastic to like have these extensions that we're like, okay, we didn't get there, but now we can have this great conversation. In terms of what's going on in the Caribbean, like we wanted to compare Jamaica and Ghana specifically because Ghana, with their Year of Return campaign, created a very targeted campaign, and one of the first that I can think of that targeted Black people and was like, Black people, come home. Whereas most of the Caribbean approach it has been doing tourism for a lot longer and has been using a mass tourism model, which is like the largest population possible, come and escape. And it's like escape from your everyday to this kind of this place that you don't have to be specific about. And so I think that was the initial idea, at least in research, was like these are such two different things. But what I think we realized as we were in these spaces that they both share in common is this sort of disregard for local populations. Like they're both having this issue, right? And this might just be an issue of the tourism industry, period, right? Of like, what is the impact that your campaigns and your strategies are having on the local environment and the local population. And then I'll pass the baton to you.
And economy as well, right? A lot of people make a living of just being able to use the water for fishing or having a small business of their own tourism, their own brand of tourism, and that is denied from so many people in the Caribbean because we have these big conglomerates buying the beaches like a storefront.
Yeah.
And setting up shop, and nobody else can use it, and it's a shame. And when we found out, the folks that were fighting for change, fighting the hard fight, and sometimes winning and sometimes losing, but mostly, stuck in court for a long time. We wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Now with the Hurricane Melissa going to Jamaica and decimating, the north part of the island, that's part of the area that we were filming. Yeah. It's a shame, and I'm hoping that a lot of these issues that they're facing now is not exacerbated by these companies coming in, developmental capitalism, when after disaster capitalism, I should say. Yeah. After a hurricane or something, they come in and they buy more land, which is what's happening right now in Jamaica.
Yeah, and again, there's so much, not only that I appreciate how much you guys cover in the show, not because again I'm Black and I'm from the Caribbean, but I actually worked in the tourism industry back home in Barbados. So wow. I have the perspective of being a tourist and then being in the industry, and you guys covered it so much and covered a lot of things that people like to kind of ignore. And I have time for one last question, and I want to talk about a little bit about the episode on the basketball, because this is one of the ones you directed, and I mentioned at the beginning another industry that has changed since the first season, and I wanted to get your perspective on what you thought of it when you were filming and after, and then looking back in hindsight and being yeah, the landscape has definitely changed since then, and then we're I think there's something kind of surreal about that.
Well, it's also just the challenging doc in general, right? We're in the edit, and then Donald Trump out of nowhere is just issuing some random orders about the limits of how much student athletes can get paid and who out of the student athletes can get paid, and the limits on visas, and we're oh my god, do we include this? It's so it just keeps changing so quickly, which helps you to know that you're in the pocket of the conversation, but you're also so you kind of have to let go of some stuff because you're just man, we have to invest in the stories that we're in.
I remember every week I was Amanda, did you see that? Yeah, I saw this. Should we? No, we had to have a baseline of let's just tell this story, and there was so much to tell. Yeah. And I used to play basketball. I used to play for many years, and I'm in the Sports Hall of Fame at the University of Windsor for basketball. And I traveled to Europe for a summer to play with the elite team. And so when I was growing up, the coaches would come to your high school and watch you play, or some tournament, or if you got some awards top athlete at your school, or in Canada on the A teams or B teams, you would be someone that they would try to scout, right? Everybody knew when the coach was coming into the games in high school. It's not like that now, as you can see from the episode. I was shocked at the amount of resources, the amount of political. You have to be political too, the backroom deals, the amount of money that parents have to spend, and resources and commitment to their child, even picking up and moving to another country sometimes just to have those opportunities available to them. And then, the episode is crazy. I could tell you about, the odds of making it into the, college ball or, the WNBA or the NBA, but you watch the episode.
39,000 to 90K it requires
US dollars.
To go to prep school in North America. Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah, it's really wild.
Yeah, someone called it a poor man's game. I'm when? No, not anymore.
It's not a poor man's game. No,
and then we didn't even touch what gambling is doing to the NBA now. So anyways,
so much. But thank you so much for wrapping up. I'm saying thank you so much for talking with me. I really enjoyed the episodes. And one small thing that you probably may not know. Today, it was declared in Kenya that they now have food sovereignty over their indigenous seeds. So the same topic that you guys covered in that episode of Ghana is now they passed the state law saying that the act that they had saying that the seeds were commercialized because of the GMOs thing is unconstitutional. So hopefully that creates a bigger ripple effect.
We have to tell the social media team to get on that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much.
No, yeah, for sure. I saw it literally on the train on the way here.
Wow.
Look at serendipity.
That's so great.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Thank you so much for today.
Thank you so much.
Yes.